Alright, go. Explain what it is.
My name is Howard Luce. I live down the Saline in Missouri, and I find all this stuff in my yard. I'm kind of like an amateur archaeologist. This stuff here is some of the bone artifacts I found. This is a handle with a notch in it. Some of them, just a few small pieces and parts of heads and stuff that I found. Most of my stuff here I'm about to show you is all historic artifacts, but this is the older stuff that I've got in with the historic artifacts. This here is the end of probably a bone handle like this one. It's got a hole pierced through it. This right here is like a chipping tool, percussion tool that Indian would use on arrowheads. That was found in my spring. This here is a dog tooth that at the very top it's been busted, but there was a hole through it, so it was a dog tooth for a necklace. These two here I think are maybe bear claws, these two weird smaller ones. The rest of these are boar tusks, and the boar tusks were a delicacy of the Osage Indians in historic times, like what I assume all this is, which is Osage Indian. These here are trade marbles from various time periods. The white ones, most of the white ones are Benningtons, and these shiny spotted ones are Benningtons also. These three here were found close together, and all three of those look alike, and they were found in a little small cache on the one side of my yard. And those are probably from like the 1700s, I would say. Trade marbles to the Indians. And this here purple one is probably the most expensive marble that I have. It's an agate marble, and if it was cleaned up a little better, which it's in good shape, it just needs to be kind of reshined. But it would be worth 500 bucks. And this little red one next to it is an agate marble that hasn't been treated, heat treated, and it's the normal color of one, but it's worth just 100 by itself. But the rest of these things, these here are some bison teeth, and this right here is probably a gorget for a protection around an Indian's neck. When I first found it, it had some gold dust on it, and it still has a little bit maybe on the back, but originally when I found it, it being so old and in the dirt for so long, that the gold dust, by washing it off, pretty much all the gold dust came off, so I assume it was gold plated. A later trade to the Indians rather than actual brass gorgets. This piece behind it I think might be a gun piece, possible gun piece or something, but it looks like a cylinder to a gun, but it's real old. It looks like brass, or I mean copper. So I really don't know what that is yet. Some of the stuff I haven't even figured out yet. This right here is a pendant that's float copper from Wisconsin. So this is a local historian in the area that does a lot of relics and sells a lot of relics. He said this is the farthest he's ever seen this float copper come this direction from out of Wisconsin. It's a pendant, pounded out pendant, and that would have been from at least 2000 BC, the way he talked. This here is looks like a granite hardstone pendant. You could clearly tell they were sanding on it into that kind of a teardrop or pear shape. This right here I feel is like maybe a small grinder or something, but it's got I think it was a small grinder maybe for red ochre war paint, because it's got red ochre. To me, it looks like red ochre embedded in the edges in a lot of these places, front and back. When I first found it, there was red coming off of it also, so I think they were using that for like a little grinder for like a mortar and pestle, type thing for war paint. This right here is a small pendant that was smoothed out and really slick, and it doesn't have a hole through it or anything, but it's probably just wasn't finished for some reason or another. This here is a real old iron that's, like back in the early 1800s. A lot of the stuff that I'll be showing you will be stuff that the Indians have raided from the white man, and because this historic site was here till probably somebody bought it right around the Civil War time. Just because I find gun cartridges still made independents and stuff like that, which white man isn't going to be doing in this historic site. So anyway, this iron was probably taken from the white settlers or something at one point in time, and I would say it's late 1700s, early 1800s, and it's a salesman iron because basically when they make them small like that, the salesmen are just carrying them around, so I have to carry the main, the main iron with them because they were so heavy, just for samples to show the women on different choices they had for irons. This here is a little pill bottle, and when I found it, it still got some little black pills in it. I kept separate from out of the dirt that was stuck down in it. So I preserved the little black pills that are in it. I mean, they weren't black originally, of course, but they were kind of dried out. But there's another little bottle I found somewhere in my yard also, and it's missing the top, but I didn't find too many bottles, so I definitely keep them all. This here's like a glass stopper for a real fancy whiskey decanter or brandy decanter or something like that, which I feel was probably robbed from the white man also, taken from settlers. This bottle here, it was rumored that in my spring there toward the 1860s or 70s, people were getting cholera from drinking out of the spring. That brought all the Indians here, but somehow the spring acquired cholera, and it's funny that somebody told me that, because right before that, right when they told me that, a few days later, I found this cholera remedy medicine bottle, and I hoped it worked out for them. But that's about everything in that case there. Well, here's a bell too. These bells usually come off like horse bridles or mule bridles and stuff like that, and the Indians would like to put them on their clothing, so that's why I figure it's probably here in my yard also, just as a decoration that came off one of the Indians' clothes. This here case right here, this is what started it all. I found this handle, just the handle itself, I found across the creek, and I found it with my metal detector, and when I found out that it was possibly back to the 1500s by how old a metal it was, that's when I knew it, and it was a definite fact that it was a sword handle. That's when I started really looking at my yard, because I'm into antiques and looking for arrowheads and stuff already anyway. So later on, I found this like 7 or 8 years ago, but just like a few months back, I found this back pommel that goes perfectly on this handle. And from what I am told, this handle here goes with these two parts of scabbard that I found probably 10 feet away from the handle across the creek where I'm living here. And very few things have I found across the creek. And this is one of the very few things I found across the creek was these sword parts. Now the pommel I found over here closer to the yard, but it does fit perfectly on this handle. But this tip was determined to be broken off from a sword, probably this sword here. And the Indians would break swords into a lot of pieces and make several arrowheads out of one big sword that they really didn't know how to use anyway. So this is like the very tip probably to this sword. It has the same exact patina age time period as these two pieces do, as determined by a professional. And so I'd say they use that for an arrowhead. This right here is an old butcher knife. It's from probably 1850s. It's got a bone handle on it, still intact. This here is one that's got pewter on the back end of it, and it's still got wood, which is unbelievable kind of, but it's still got wood that's still rotted. I think the clay type atmosphere that this was found in kind of preserved the wood somewhat, so I thought that was kind of neat just to keep a hold of it. And a lot of the stuff isn't worth much, it's just study value, and it's just neat to look at in my book, But so anyway, this right here, I found this little knife. It's made out of a real thin metal, and made out of like a piece of white man scrap metal, and it's made by the Indians. And then the sheath right here I found right close to it, and it's got spirals of decorative indentations all the way around it. And you don't notice that unless you look at it good and hard, but it's like protruding spiral indentations all the way around it. And I presume the Indians probably got a hold of some kind of coating of a fancy trunk or something and made that into a sheath for this knife. It's a little patch knife is what I would presume for black powder rifles. This pocket knife here, I found that right in front of my yard, and it's early 1800s trade pocket knife. It's got bone handles. It's in pretty good shape for being in the ground 200 years. This one here I found on the side of my yard, and it's missing a little bit. It's missing the handles, and it's probably not as old as some of the rest of these in here. This one here was in pieces and kind of really disintegrated, but that doesn't always mean your knives are older than any of the rest of the knives you got in there. That means sometimes that some of these were lesser quality and maybe made later, but disintegrated more. So it doesn't always mean they're older. This knife here was found. I found that on top of my hill, not in my yard, but I found it on top of my hill. It's around 1914. It's got instead of being plastic, it's made out of a different material that I can't think of. Well, yeah, it is. It's called Bakelite. That's the material this is made out of, and they only used it for a couple of years, to my understanding. And it was real highly flammable material. If you got a flame anywhere near it, it would just go up like gunpowder. And so that's why it was a preliminary to plastic. And if you flip this knife over, it's got a burn spot on it where you could tell maybe a kid got too close to a campfire or something, and you could just see the melted spot on it, like it just took off. Like they say, it was really flammable. So you know that's around 1914 or 15. This right here is a hilt which the Indians had busted. It would have been longer on this side, and there would have been another one on this side, because you could tell it was clipped off. But the Indians had clipped off this side, left this side, and they sharpened this side down to a fine edge. And when they sharpened this side down to a fine edge, they were using it as a thumb scraper, you know, to scrape things, since this is so razor sharp over here. And it's clearly, you know, chopped off also, so it would have went out farther. So it would have been a hilt to a sword. This right here is a key, just a real old key, which there again is probably something that the Indian just got a hold of from ripping off a wagon, and maybe used it as a pendant here at my yard and lost it eventually. This right here is a kettle, part of a really old kettle, and it's kettle iron, and it's real sharp on all sides right here, and it's dull still on the back. And this here is, if you see it close enough, there's part of a rim right here about an inch down lower, and but they made this all razor sharp here, and it's not real easy to work with, so it took some time to get something even as nice as this made out of cast iron with it being so bright, you know, with it being so brittle. This right here is copper, and before I knew what I was finding all these little curlicue wire things, and I hadn't found this piece here yet, but I dig on my stuff, you know, like maybe once a day or once every other 2 or 3 days. But at first I was finding these curlicues, and I didn't know what they were. I just thought it was maybe barbed wire or something sitting around in my yard, just newer junk possibly. And then I didn't realize it, but it was mail, which goes to mail armor, and which gives you your mobility with armor in your armpits and where you got to move your joints and stuff. And it looks like, to me, it's got all these holes all the way across it. So to me, it looks like the Indian had got a hold of this armor and busted it up into strips or pieces and used them for arrowheads or whatever they used them for also. But this particular piece, it looks like they banged it out into a pendant, and it's just all been folded and beaten down into a pendant. And at the time, it would have been really sharp, really shiny, you know, like a brand new penny is what color that would have been at the time, so that you can imagine that being on an Indian's chest when they've never seen copper before, for the most part. Yeah, like I said, this here was the sword that I found in the beginning. This here, I found this in my yard also. I feel this one here is silver, which is very few things that I have found that's gold or silver in my yard, unfortunately. But this here is silver, and it's part of it's part of the hilt of a knife also, like this one over here. It's just part that's been broken off, is what I feel. I don't know what else it would have been but that. Now we'll move to this next frame here.
Hold on.